Pepsi.
Maybe in a bit.
I'm currently 3 beers in. I'm thinking about switching to weed, though, so we'll see.
I've smoked a ton of cigarettes. Does that count?
That does count. It's
Yeah.
an upper. All right. 32 days, 8 castaways, 5 co-hosts, and 1 podcast. This is Stranded in Tanzania, and I'm your host, Poody. Today we're joined by 5 co-hosts and alumni of Stranded, Hannah and Danny from Stranded in Turks and Caicos, Season 32.
Good riddance, Dean.
Yeah.
Nate, who originally played in Stranded in Faroe Islands, Season 25.
Relevant intro line.
Lavita, who originally played in Stranded for Victory, Season 36.
She's not talking.
And Reem, who originally played in Stranded in Kuril Islands, Season 35.
Salutations.
So today we're going to go over everything since the merge. We last spoke previewing the merge, and since then we've had 5 tribal councils with boots at each of them, so we have a lot to cover. We are right now at the final 8, looking into the final week of the season, so we'll preview that. But first, let's take a look back. I guess we'll start with the Missy boot at Final 13.
Tragic. But she had it
It
coming.
was robbed.
Yeah, like many people this season, we had a roller coaster of with Missy this season where we went from rooting for her to rooting against her at some points, back to rooting for her. What I can say is that she certainly delivered.
100%. She was second coming of Liliana.
No, I agree. We were talking about this last night. How, every so often we have one person that is so insane, everybody talks about them. I think going back to Stranded 3, there was Lil. Season 1, there was Gretchen. More recently, we've had, Sarah and Garrett. And I think, we were thinking that we haven't had a player like that in a long time. But I think we stumbled upon one with Missy. Reem, where did you find this child and who hurt him?
So he called me out of the blue one day to ask if he could job shadow me, and he did. And then I stole him from another hotel, and he started working for me, and we bonded over Survivor. And that's when he started watching all of my career stuff and rooting against me. Have you been voted out yet? And it just kind of sent him into an org roller coaster. And that's all he's been doing ever since.
I think Missy, we spoke about it in the last podcast where I said she's kind of playing ahead of people. And we knew that would catch up to her sooner or later. I mean, you can't make those kind of moves and go by unscathed totally. It did catch up to her sooner than I thought it would, though.
I would agree with you a little bit there, Poody, but I do think Missy fits kind of one of the multiple versions of your prototypical merge boot. The fact that she made it past the tribal council where Chelsea got voted out was a big enough surprise for me that she wasn't just a consensus boot there for being so crazy. The fact that it took an entire weekend of people comparing notes and really figuring out where the flips were and who betrayed who. Once you have that full weekend for everybody to compare notes, Missy is the sore thumb of the group. She's a big personality. She's loud. She's publicly made chats across tribes. I think she fits that merge boot position perfectly.
Yeah, this was really when we saw a split down the middle, but we finally saw 2 sides forming, the Proto side and the Nairi Bros. Yeah, so this vote and a few of the others were split straight down the middle. This was a 7-6 vote.
That is correct.
And so it's not like Missy misstepped and was an obvious boot. It was pretty close.
Yeah, but I also would venture to say that the only reason Missy had the 6 extra votes is that she was promising the Peroto people that she would vote with them. Because I'm pretty sure that's another one where it was split. It was Missy and Angelina, and then Cara, John, Allison, and then I don't know who the last vote was for Lauren off the top of my head. But I mean, it was really just Missy. Basically, it was Jack. Jack did vote for Lauren. I thought he voted against Missy. I thought that was where he started to betray the Peroto
Yeah, but Jack
people.
voted for Missy.
Yeah.
Jack voted for Missy. So the votes for Missy were Aaron, Carl, Jack, Dean, Jack, Lauren, and Tommy. So basically, Douche Bros plus Miumbo turning on Missy. And then we saw Jack flip from Proto to his original alliance with Miumbo.
Well, also, even if there wasn't a majority of votes on Missy, she would have gone home because Lauren played her public idol. She didn't need to, but she did. And then didn't Carl get scared and play his, or am I jumping ahead?
Jumping ahead.
That's
Jumping
the
ahead.
next one.
My bad.
They were trying to scare Carl into playing his, though.
I don't hate the move by Lauren. But she did really narrowly go home. If Jack sticks with Peroto, she's fucked here. Of course, we're going to see Lauren go immediately after that, which was disappointing, but with more fuckery. So here was kind of just, I mean, Missy had an idea that she was potentially going to go home. I think it just came down to Jack flipping back to the guys, you know.
I do want to make a comment. I thought it was hilarious, like towards the end, where Missy was asking Lauren, please play the idol on me when they were voting her out.
Yeah, so Missy's getting votes together to get rid of Lauren, and meanwhile asking Lauren to play the idol on her. That tribal council was insane, too. This is when whispering was at its peak. This one and the next one. Where everyone kind of scrambled, unsure of idols, and I think once Lauren was waving it around, they knew, like, you know, maybe we should change our vote, but they weren't really sure.
Yeah, I think the big unanswered question, like, the alternate universe version of this season is where Missy and Lauren are able to get together and get on the same page finally and are able to actually work together so they wouldn't be cut off by the warring alliances taking off some of the stragglers as casualties.
I kind of thought Angelina would be the link between those two, but no. So let's go ahead and talk about the next tribal council where, tragically, Lauren gets the boot. But it was super exciting because originally going into that tribal, it was all the original Nairi plus Mayumbo people plus Allison. And of course, we know John and Carl both have idols. So for a long while, Carl was the main target. And then, you know, last minute, I think it switched to Dan. And then during Tribal Council, it switched again, I think once it becomes apparent that people know about the votes. So John kind of gets clued into that.
Yeah, I mean, before we go too deep into this tribal council, we should make clear that this vote is a clusterfuck that started the minute they merged after Allison and Dean started their whirlwind romance on the Stranded forums.
We're gonna get into Allison and Dean.
But that's the whole point of this tribal, because Allison was the backup vote.
All right, well, let's dive into it. Essentially, anyone who's been watching has been following this story very closely because Allison is a flirty girl. She's a single mom, and the whole season she's been flirting with various cast members. However, it has stepped into a more serious category when she started flirting with Dean. Dean, of course, being a completely gay male. And it was so cringy. I mean, at first it was kind of funny, you know, like he's playing into it and, you know, that's okay. But as time went on, Allison started to develop feelings for Dean. At least it seemed to go that way. And I think the worst part about it is that Dean was taking advantage of that. And it went so far as to be like, let's see each other when we get out of here. Kiss me on my forehead before we go to bed. And I mean, Allison has seemed to have been a good sport about it, but hey, you know, people are watching this. I had to just ask her because, you know, we've had in the past where people didn't know. They were being watched and sexted and whatever else on, you know, IM. But now she was totally cool with that. She was like, you know, whatever, watch away. I just think that she really bought into the relationship to the point where I think she never expected him to turn on her. So that was really, really alarming.
Yeah, I mean, that whole relationship from start to finish, like, you know, most people in online games, they'll be flirty, they'll joke around, they'll make crude jokes with each other. But after like a day or two of it, it became clear that that relationship meant a lot to Allison and she was really enjoying talking to him. And I think what sat wrong with a lot of people was that Dean would then turn around and mock his conversations that he was having with Allison to the rest of his alliance, which, you know, is also pretty par for the course in a lot of these games. But it got kind of hard to watch. And that led up to her being somebody that he wanted out of the game at this tribal council.
Yeah, I think that was the savagery. And we also have to talk about, from a game perspective, that made absolutely no sense because he has this great alliance he's built beyond the game with someone, and he's kind of like throwing that away because I don't know why. It didn't make sense. It just seemed really malicious, I think. Even if he was lying to her and using it to his advantage, A, it doesn't make game sense why he would get rid of her, and B, it's a little like rubbing salt in the wound. It's like, hey, I'm tricking you not only in the game, but I'm also going beyond that and tricking your emotions too. I'm making you make mistakes in the game, and really he's kind of making a fool out of her, and I don't think anyone liked to see that, really, at least from a lurking perspective.
100%. It was very awkward.
Yeah, I his whole thing as, I don't know if he was like playing it up for us or whatever, but it was almost like he was just doing it to do it. And again, it didn't make any game sense because she trusted him. So I don't know why he would turn around and try to, throw her out when she's giving him all this information from the other side. It just makes
right. Like that's almost the ideal situation, especially knowing that somebody in your alliance like Carl has an idol. If you have somebody from the other alliance who's feeding you literally everything they're saying, you keep that person because they're going to alert you to when you need the idol. So for next time, Dean.
It wasn't good strategically. It wasn't good personally. It wasn't even good just as another human being to another human being. I think, this is such a tough one because part of us, I had to check myself after a while because Dean has his fans. And certainly Dean was a likable guy. I mean, in the beginning, he was top of the popularity. He's now gone to the bottom. But, I have to think like, okay, is this just something funny and over the top someone's doing in a game to get ahead and not taking it seriously, just so immersed at this very moment that we're taking it a little too far? Probably a little bit of both. I think, even Allison after the fact didn't seem to be super offended by it, but watching it, I think, because we're so invested in these people and we really want Protos to succeed as underdogs, that added a little bit to the hatred of Dean. And two, it's a lot like the Missy situation. We hated Missy when she was shitting on Elizabeth and getting Elizabeth out. Does that mean we hate Missy overall? No. We hate Dean overall because of this? No. I mean, some people will, but I don't know. I think he has enough time to repair it if he can. That's Otto throwing up in the background.
Oh, Otto.
It's such a sticky wicket because we're not these people. We're just observing from a distance. So for us, it's super easy to be like, he's a sleazebag. Doing that is not cool.
Yeah, you can't take anything we're saying seriously in the lurker server. Like, we're like Twitter. Something happens and we blow it way out of proportion and we talk about it with each other and we're blasting Dean. Like, if Allison's cool with him, it's cool. It just came off kind of gross and we had a blast trash talking. So
yeah, and not to be entirely resort oriented, but we got a really good men ain't shit moment next episode when Carl got voted out.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, from a lurker's perspective, this whole thing is completely fascinating. In the past few seasons, since we started the instant messaging, Stranded it's become very personal when people are messaging day and night. We've had relationships form, we've had very close friendships form, very huge rivalries over things that are very personal. So it's not unheard of that we would have a situation like this, where someone is flirting to get ahead in the game and to take advantage of someone else who is susceptible to that. And in this case, it's a gay man taking advantage of a straight woman. So it's a little gray. If this was a woman taking advantage of a man, I don't think that they'd have that same anger towards him. Some people might disagree with me. I think that plays into it too. I'm giving Dean the benefit of the doubt here, but at the time, it was very disturbing, to say the least.
Yeah, I think for me, the most disturbing parts were after the Lauren vote, where he's using that relationship explicitly as a weapon to trick her.
Yeah, so let's get into the Lauren vote. As we were saying, it's like 8 votes against Allison at this tribal council. It's going to be Dean from the Peroto people. They don't have the numbers, but going into tribal council, they get a message from Tommy that, is the vote Allison? Or, he kind of... He whispers to John. Yeah, he whispers to John, really confirming that people are voting for this person, really sending a panic through Carl, who has an idol, and Dean, really, who were like, well, maybe you should play your idol on Dan, I think.
On Dan, yeah.
Yeah, the person that they know are getting votes. And at that point, John is smart enough to know, like, okay, well, they know we're voting for Dan, so we should change our votes. And he messages only Kara and
Allison.
Yeah. He does not message Angelina, who was also voting with them, because I think he wanted to keep it to people he knew 100% were not going to spill to the other side, which I think is very smart. I want to commend John's quick thinking throughout this whole tribal council because he fucking nailed it and reacted very quickly, which I think that's difficult to do. So kudos to John. We are continually impressed with John, but particularly during this tribal council.
John had no business surviving this week.
And kudos to Carl, too, for reacting quickly during this tribal council. Well, really, the best gameplay this season, I think, was during this tribal council, and it secured John's longevity. I mean, we really thought he should have gone probably at the Missy tribal council, but for sure by now. So kudos to John for that. But essentially, it comes down, John places idol on Allison, who still, by the way, believes that Dean is with her. The boys play their idol on Dan. The vote comes out, and the 3 votes for Lauren are enough to get her out.
Just a correction, Poody. Carl played his idol on himself there.
Yeah, he laid down.
Because I remember in the lurker server, we were like, Dan's going home. This is hilarious. And then we were like, oh, wait, actually, Carl saved himself, thinking Carl fucked up, which he did. But
I mean, he did. We thought for a while they were going to be no votes and rocks because, 2 idols were being played on the people that were getting votes. But so much happened during that tribal council. So Carl played it for himself. I actually give Carl a lot of credit in this season, though, as a strategist. I think of those men, he was certainly the best strategist of them. And I think him going first of the men, which we'll get to in the next tribal council, I think was probably John's best move.
Yeah, I
agree with that.
I can't really blame Carl for playing the idol on himself, especially because, you heard Dan's name, but then you also see the whisper going to John. You see John start whispering to Kara and Allison. You see Jack whisper to John, confirming the Allison vote. Like, he knows that they're switching up where their vote is going. And at that point, I'm sure in his mind, he was just like, I'm just going to save my own ass. If I lose Dan, I lose Dan. We still have the numbers because at that point they did. Like, I think he was just playing for the next round at that point.
And it's important to remember that that idol was only good for that tribal and the next.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just need to take the free round.
So, does anyone have any more comments on this tribal council? Because I know we have a lot to cover.
No, it was fun to watch.
We have a lot to talk about in the next one, too.
These first 3 tribal councils were some of the best Stranded's had.
Yeah, I mean, even the lurking during this, if you missed out on the lurking, I'm sorry, because it was a hell of a show, and we desperately needed something to watch because of the pandemic.
And Big Brother.
Yeah, right.
The pandemic, known as Big Brother 22.
Because if you looked away for like 5 minutes at best, sometimes even like a couple minutes, you've already missed a whole page. So,
yeah. During the Lauren boot, there was like a 2-minute period where 6 people could have went home easily.
Yeah, 20 minutes was not enough during these councils. We really should have made them 30, especially with all the whispering going on. But certainly, I think that added to the paranoia. So after this vote, of course, Lauren goes home, but Allison should have gone home. So we get a fallout. Immediately, I think a lot of people's hatred of Dean got much worse in the next couple of hours because Dean immediately explained away the vote by saying that it was all Tommy's fault. And initially, Allison bought into that. And that's just a super awkward thing when, it really harkens back to when someone is in a bad relationship and they get into a fight with someone and they take them back for a shitty explanation. That's kind of what we saw with Dean and Allison here. She kind of bought it hook, line, and sinker. That, oh no, it was all Tommy lying and coming between us. Even though, like, deep down, I think she knew that Dean had fucked her over. I don't think she wanted to believe it just because. And so we really saw a lot of Kara and John being like, I think Dean is not with us. And they were really gentle about it, which is another credit to their gameplay here. They weren't like over the top, fuck Dean, he fucked us here, because that would be my reaction. They were really subtle and understanding of Allison's relationship with Dean. And they were like, I think, maybe we should look at why Dean possibly could have flipped. I'm hearing it's probably Dean, so I think because of their coercion during that, Allison finally kind of came around the next morning to the fact that Dean had screwed her over.
Yeah, I think it also took people really talking out the numbers because immediately after that tribal happened, Allison bombarded Dean with a ton of messages and he wasn't responding, which wasn't good for her psyche. And then he's like, oh, well, it was Tommy's idea because Tommy told people about our alliance. And so Tommy wanted to vote you out. And wouldn't mention that he also voted for her. And she was like, I know, but the numbers don't make sense because she knew who the 3 Lauren votes were. She knew who the 1 Dan vote was from Angelina. Therefore, everybody else in the game had to vote for her. And he just kept skating around the topic. So he didn't give her enough reassurance to be able to counteract the cold hard facts of they knew who the 4 votes that weren't for her were.
It has to be mentioned that during this time, Dean is telling Aaron that Allison and him flirt a lot and he's got her snowed into believing that, laughing and high-fiving about it. So that was really gross to watch. Didn't help Dean's case, especially since he lied about it. And then, I think this was the following tribal council when he was really on the ropes. We start seeing Dean lying about his sexuality to Aaron. I'm not sure if he was scared of Aaron's reaction because he's kind of not a gracious ear to fall on when Dean is telling him this. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like you said before, I can't fault Dean for manipulating Allison. Because I said in the lurker server that my husband and I have had this conversation. If I went on a show and there is a dude interested in me, I would totally exploit it. But I'm not going to target that person immediately. I'm going to continue exploiting it. That's what you do in a game. I can fault him for just doing it to do it. It just didn't make sense.
And making fun of her. I'm not sure if we're ready for this yet, but the conversation where Allison says, hey, with an exclamation point to Aaron, and Aaron and Dean make fun of her and say that she's crazy and upset just for the hey. I was so fucking mad. I was like fuming at that.
Yeah, like I said, it just doesn't make sense.
Can't fault the flirting for trying to get ahead, but that was ridiculous.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like, he didn't even get ahead with it. Like, he didn't even try. It's so dumb.
We were at How I Text My Bros. Wow, this bitch is crazy. Every time I receive a text from a woman.
Yikes. Is all I have to say to that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, part of me thinks it's super easy to vilify someone in these things and get into groupthink. As Reem knows with Winston. No shade. It's just super easy to get into game mode, find an enemy, and use that enemy to bond yourself with other people. And I think that's what's happening with Dean. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt because I really like Dean. I just feel like he made some really shitty decisions towards someone who's very sweet. I think, Allison. And we hate to see someone get taken advantage of, especially by someone in majority.
Which makes the next couple tribals even sweeter.
Yes. So we do have to get into following that. Finally, Nick decides to make a move, and Tommy decides to make a move with Proto. Nick flips to the Proto 4, which are now including Angelina, minus Jack.
Jack.
Correct. Jack is flipped. Which, by the way, was a great conversation between Jack and John, where Jack came crawling back and John was like, fuck you, but that's coming. Nick and Tommy flip on their bros. They're unaware of this. So at this point, Dean is assuming everything's Gucci with him and Aaron. And that's going to make that tribal council so delicious because I think Carl was quoted as saying, like, I'm normally not confident, but tonight I'm super confident. Carl, of course, has played his idol on himself. The previous council, he has no ammunition. Tonight they're going to make a move on John, of course. And the Proto 4 have swung Nick and Tommy to create a majority. So the votes are going to shake out 5 John, 6 Carl. I don't think any idols were played, correct? There were no idols left at this point.
There were also no whispers at Tribal. They were all like, we're so over whispers. Whispers are the worst. Because here you have this like group of people who are all like, we're comfortably in the majority and we're just going to pick off the Perotos. We don't need to whisper. At the same time, like...
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have scripted it better because Dean had reached his peak of douchebaggery with Allison. He was almost bragging about duping her and continually duping her. And then they finally get the numbers. So we're going to see Carl go home in an epic blindside. Really shifted this season from like a good season to a fantastic season. And then we're going to get the wonderful fallout of the douche bro lines crumbling. Before we get to that point, is there anything from this round you guys want to talk about?
Can we talk about John and Dan's dick measuring contest at Tribal Council? Just like the constant back and forth of like little jabs, like, oh, like who's the GOAT now? Am I the only one who remembers that?
I don't remember that.
No, I don't remember that. I was about to bring up the stupid numbers challenge.
I remember that.
That was like the best part of that tribal. Like John basically calls out Dan for being like a worthless piece of shit and never going to win the game. And Dan comes back and has like all of these like, okay, John, like get off your high horse. Like, and it's just so cocky. And just because Dan thinks that he's pulling one over on John, like, haha, John, you're going home. And meanwhile, John's doing the exact same thing, being like a dick because he's like, haha, you guys don't know that you're about to get blindsided. And it was just like a funny running thing for the entire tribal between those two, only to end in the Perotos coming out on top.
And you gotta love the gif that John posted of his wrestling character doing like a body slam on someone else. No, it was just such a good moment. And you know, the fallout from that was just so delicious, especially after Dean was such a dick to Allison. The only thing better than that would have been a Dean boot, but at least we got to see Dean squirm for the next 2 rounds.
Personally, I was happy that it was Carl, though, because like I think Carl probably would have been a little bit better at being able to find a way forward. I think by blindsiding him, the clear strategic threat of that group, and leaving Dean and Aaron, who have just kind of been like riding their high horse from the swap to try and scramble and figure something out. I think that was ideal for us.
Oh, Aaron is atrocious as a player. I mean, I love Aaron. I really do. I think he's a good guy generally. Some of his comments towards Allison were not great, or even Dean were not good, especially towards his sexuality. But all that aside, I think he's just a terrible player that I enjoy the enthusiasm of. But the best part is that we're going to see Aaron and Dean scrambling hardcore, and Allison having just turned on them, not buying into it at all. It's interesting because after this, the next two councils are, for the most part, unanimous. I mean, at least the Perotos have their shit together, you know?
Yeah, I think that, the Carl blindside really was like the peak of this, of just like hardcore strategy. A lot of people playing hard, trying to get themselves into a position to make it through the week. And after that happened, I think everybody, after 3 crazy tribals in a row, was like, let's just ride it for a little bit. Like, Dean is a big enough threat. Let's take him out. Everyone hates Dan. Let's take him out. Like, there just was no real reason for them to turn on that majority for the rest of the week. So we kind of got to ride a little bit of the wave of that excitement through the week and hope that it was good enough,
I just want to comment about Carl making it to the jury, because him being there and just there for the booze is kind of the best thing ever.
I love Carl. This is someone who Levita really vouched for. Didn't really want to cast because we thought he'd be a game bot, but he was like the best game bot in the best way because he was so aggressively strategic that it was entertaining. And if you're going to be a game bot, that's the way to do it. So shout out to Carl. And I totally agree with Danny and a few of the other guys that getting rid of Carl was the best move because he was those guys' only hope in any kind of strategy. They have just not been good strategically at all. Like they really should have been able to flip the vote and get rid of John by this point. But John's still in the game and it's final 8.
I will say one thing I want to say for Carl before we move on to boring this week. Carl's whole plan going into merge was to get together like a super majority in order to take out John. And I really think that not capitalizing on that back at the Missy boot at that first merge tribal, not capitalizing on it after planning on it for a full week, I think that's ultimately what did him in. They went for the wild card that's easy to boot at any point rather than going for the clear strategic threat. And they let him slip by just a little bit too long for him to be able to pull something off.
Yeah.
What do we think about, that's a good point. What do we think about, I'll get to you, Tim, your thoughts to hold on to those. What do we think about John targeting Lauren when he flipped the vote? Because I think that was probably a mistake. I think, you don't want to go after the wild cards when there are 2 solid alliances battling.
I agree with that. I probably would have, I wouldn't have gone after Carl or Dean probably at that point. I probably would have gone after Aaron.
Kara tried to push for Aaron too. I think it was just the reason John specifically wanted Lauren is that he and Lauren got into a little spat after the Missy vote. So by taking her out, he made sure to take somebody out who was specifically mentioning him as somebody they were after.
Right.
And also, he really had to quickly change the vote. I think it was 5 minutes before votes were due before he said, hey, everyone, vote for Lauren. So he had to pick somebody who he knew that people were going to throw votes on because he already saw people throw votes on her.
Yeah, that's a really good point. He didn't have that much time to actually think it all through.
Yeah, with how quick it was and the fact that Lauren probably isn't really a wild card for John.
Yeah.
You need to get rid of the least flexible player at that time, and keeping both Nick and Tommy and definitely serve them well.
Levita says, I don't think he thought he could get Allison to get rid of Aaron at that point. I think you guys make a good point. Getting rid of Lauren might have pushed the needle in his favor for grabbing Nick. So I don't know. I mean, look, John is someone we did not give a chance of getting past Final 10. So the fact that he's still in is miraculous in itself and kind of shows how far and above he is strategically from a lot of these players that I don't think are that great.
Yeah, John this season is...
We love you guys.
John's a player who you give it... If you give an inch, he'll take a mile out of it. And that's how he lived this week.
Well, to be fair, John has been playing probably for 10 years. And some of these people, this is their first game. So, a little bit to be expected. But also, we can't knock it. But also, I just think some people are making rookie mistakes, which is to be expected. But the next vote is Dan, unanimously, which I kind of found hilarious. Dan, after this blindside, basically just logs off, doesn't show up. They vote him off unanimously for being a dick. I don't think anyone was, vouching for Dan to stay in the game. So it was funny that this was, a unanimous vote. All that said, Dan has been a pretty good sport about everyone calling him a douchebag. So there is hope. But yeah, it was no surprise. And then we also see, Dean and Aaron grovel and agree to a unanimous vote. It was really good to see a grovel.
Well, yeah, they were groveling because Angelina promised them 2 rounds of safety if they voted how she wanted, which was like, I don't know. This is kind of where Angelina starts to become more of a focal point of the season, for me at least, is she starts to get a little bit more ballsy because she finds the idol here and she's getting a little ballsy with being able to tell people what she wants to happen, which is entirely why the vote was on Dan and not one of Aaron and Dean. Because Angelina was like, well, no, I'm voting for Dan because Dan's tried to vote me out twice.
I kind of love that, but I also think that might be the reason why it bites the Peroto 3 in the butt. Because I think Angelina is really rogue at this point. I mean, I love that for her and for the game. She found the idol. She was the only one to go for the third clue immediately, which kind of gave away the idol, so she got it. Everyone else was kind of slow on the trigger. And she was really quick about kind of bullying people into doing what she wanted. And sometimes you got to be that way. You can't always float along with plans. And I actually think floating along with plans is going to bite John, Kara, and Allison in the butt. I think at the next Tribal Council, but we'll talk about that when we preview the final 8 going forward.
The storyline of these last 2 episodes has definitely been Angelina rising as a force against John. If the question is John going to realize and take her out, or is Angelina going to be the one to take John out and win?
Right. I mean, he's a pretty smart guy, but you have to have foresight enough to know that you should probably work with Dean and Aaron at this point, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, the person with the least experience and the person with the most experience.
Yeah, the next Tribal Council was fun. Really, the Peroto could have decided whoever they wanted, and they chose Dean. Finally, some retribution from Allison, yay. So justified. Dean goes home, but not before playing a fake idol he made, convincingly enough, because when he played it, everyone within that 5-minute window before I confirmed or denied it, everyone had assumed it was
their
real.
Damn minds.
Most notably, Nick messages John, like, hey, Angelina told me she had the idol. I didn't think she'd give it to Dean. She fucked us over. And John and everyone is assuming that Angelina gave Dean her real idol and are calling Angelina out, like, Angelina, what the fuck? And she's like, hold on just a minute. And then it's revealed that it's a fake idol and it's not going to count. And then Nick hilariously posts, disregard what I just said. He kind of outed that Angelina told him that she found the idol. I think probably the most hilarious way an idol has ever been outed. Dean served no purpose in that other than fucking up other people's games, but he did it anyway.
Yeah. I guess my biggest disappointment with Dean this round was, considering it's final 9, a round where you can get people to flip, he really should have worked on that a lot earlier. He had a full round in the
No
Dan
shit.
booth.
Why didn't he post it at the start of Tribal Council? Yeah, I got an idol. I ain't going home tonight,
Why didn't he post it at the end of the day? He could have played that.
Go ahead, Nate.
And he could have played at the start of the Dan Tribal Council and be like, oh, am I playing it today? Give them a full round to think. An alternate plan, at least.
Even before Tribal Council, it was like all fucking day. He was pussyfooting it around with everybody else, like, oh, who are you voting for? Knowing it's him because Angelina had already told him. Angelina had already admitted she had the idol. And he just pussyfooted all day until Tribal. Like, you had all day.
Yeah, it's like he was so, he knew he was going, he wanted to go out with a bang. Well, go out with a bang and stay in the game. Like, use that shit, and it totally would have worked. Like, they would have believed it 100%. If he had posted that at the start of Tribal Council and said, well, I hope you ain't voting for me tonight, 100% they would have changed their vote. I mean, who knows who else it would have been, but he would have still been in the game. And at final 8, that is huge.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I found so funny about this round is Dean and Aaron just both lamenting in their confessionals about how boring the season is going to be because everyone's just going to get steamrolled by this alliance that started 2 rounds before and that, oh, like, woe is me. I think the lurkers are going to hate the season because everyone's playing so boring. Meanwhile, we're over here like, Dean, in your confessional 2 days ago, you talked about how your group of 8 that voted together was just going to vote together all 4 people from Peroto out in a row. Like, it's literally the exact same plan and you're just sad because it's backfiring on you now.
I mean, that's what it is. Everybody vilifies someone else and they're the hero of their own story. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. Dean is not the hero of this story. And really, it's been John and the Peroto people for the majority of the season. That's just what all the people watching from a distance have seen. And, I'm sure there are Dean fans and, I know Elizabeth is one, but from an outsider's perspective, that's kind of the story of the season is these Peroto 4 against, what did they merge with 9 people who were against them? Like, it's just unrealistic for them to think that they were the underdogs here. They're only the underdogs here because they played so sloppily when they had the lead. And that's really the truth. Let's go forward with the final 8. I really don't think it looks good for John. I think he's letting Angelina dictate too much of the last 2 rounds with Dan and Allison chose Dean, but really Angelina was ahead of that move. And Angelina has kind of been working on Nick and Tommy and Aaron, so I totally see John potentially going next. And if not next, certainly by Final 7.
Which, to be fair, we did say that last week, which is the one
well,
good thing on
I was going to
John's end.
say, if you had asked us before the merge, we definitely said he would go one of the first 2 boots, so certainly he's capable of outlasting because he's quick on his feet. But right now it doesn't look too good.
I think pending immunities the next couple days, I think John is for sure 8, 7, or 6. Because the bigger problem for him, more than Angelina, calling some shots, more than the fact that he came up as like the most likely to win in touchy subjects, the biggest issue is that out of his closest allies in Kara and Allison, Kara wants to take him out, and she has for at least 2 or 3 rounds now where she said she needs to make a move on him at some point. Allison is loyal to him, but I do think Allison is going to make plans with people like Tommy, people like Kara. She's going to spread her wings because I think it's becoming evident that John is the major threat left in the game at this point. And if they don't take care of him, then no one stands a chance at winning. So he's kind of top of everybody's list.
Yeah, I was reading the chats today. Allison was working on Aaron and Tommy today as well. I think Sunday is ultimately going to come down to what they're doing about Angelina's idol, because that's been a lot of talk today about flushing it or downright targeting her. So if they do target her and she plays the idol, I don't know who she's going to target or who's actually going to go home if that's the case.
Yeah, it's an interesting case because I think the Angelina and Nick partnership own a lot of power in this game at this moment. And if their side wins, John's out. But if John's side wins, Kara cuts John, or even Kara wants to bring Nick and Tommy with her. One of them's gone as well.
Are Angelina and Nick even still good after he outed her idol? I thought that was gonna destroy
according
things.
to her confessional, she's over it, but she hasn't talked about like a final 3. Like she doesn't even care who she sits against. If I'm reading her confessionals right, she just wants to make it to the end. And I think
that's a good strategy. That's kind of how I played, where once you get to these small numbers, you have to realize only one person gets to sit next to 2 goats. So really it's in your best interest to sit next to maybe the second most popular person and duke it out at Final Tribal and be okay with that. You really have to be okay with beating anyone at Final Tribal. And I know that goes against game strategy, but at the end of the day, for some people like John, Angelina, even Nick, you have to be okay with beating the best at the end, because all it takes is getting to the end for those people. That's their number one priority, because otherwise they're sitting on the jury voting for someone else against goats.
Right. So I really do think it's going to come down to what's going to happen on Sunday. And I couldn't even tell you what
it's so up in the air. It's such a good point to have a long weekend because there's so much going on. I think the last Tribal Council was a no-brainer. This one is not. I think, Peroto needs to decide if they want to stick together through the Final 4. They won't. They shouldn't. Maybe they will, but they definitely shouldn't. Everyone has to decide who I want to sit next to in the end. Fuck alliances at this point. It's kind of like, I need to sit next to the best people I can beat, or just get to the end. So, people are going to start looking at people like Aaron, Tommy. Jack has potential GOAT story against Kara, who hasn't shown up much or talked to the other people. So people are either going to have to cut the big threats, leaving the least threatening people in the game, as is usually the case, or stick to alliances. I don't know what will happen. It's kind of all over the place. Like, it's muddied, right? Like, everyone should, at this point, look at getting rid of John. But Angelina has an idol. So do we blindside Angelina while she thinks the vote is on John? Or do we use Angelina's idol to get rid of John? There's so much that could happen at the final 8 on. And really, it's going to come down to the wire. I think if they start getting rid of John, Angelina, Nick next, it's really Aaron. It's going to become goats at the end. And so they need to be aware of that. This is a very crucial point in the game.
So to quickly derail, I kind of want to talk about the challenges, because since the merge, there hasn't been one person who's won 2 challenges. And that kind of makes things a little unpredictable as far as who will win what challenges, because it's
really been awful.
Yeah, the challenges have been awful as far as especially the numbers
really
one.
Numbers was like an hour long.
The numbers one, I was crying over how awful it was.
I'm glad you brought up the challenges. I mean, people are terrible at challenges, not the best strategists, but so entertaining because of it. But really, it's like I wouldn't call these people like the best gameplay we've ever seen. Probably the opposite. But certainly the entertainment level is there.
Yeah. Keep in mind, in the numbers challenge, we had 3 people basically ask the question, do you win? And they said no.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people who just weren't fucking paying attention. Kara fucking re-asked questions that have been answered 3 times. We already know nobody's number 12, all right? Stop asking number 12. We've eliminated everyone. Pay the fuck attention. And they wouldn't. It's like an hour in, and they're re-asking questions. It's someone else's turn. Oh, well, surely they'll get it, because there's only 2 numbers left that it could possibly be. They weren't keeping track.
Hey, Poody, are you 12?
Am I 12? No, I'm not 12. Yes, again.
Sorry,
David's actually 15.
I mean, my God, how many times do we have to get stupid questions during this challenge? Like, you weren't paying attention, you didn't have a spreadsheet out, and if you did, you fucked it all up. It was awful. Definitely the most embarrassing performance challenge-wise we've ever seen. And some of the worst strategy overall this season I think we've ever seen. No wonder John is still in the game because, I mean, frankly, he's done it longer than everyone else, and everyone's newness is showing. Not the best strategic season, but certainly I think everyone is delivering character-wise, and they show promise for the future. But I think they're going to look back and be like, what the fuck was I doing during that? I don't know.
Right.
I am fairly certain the pre-merge casts are better than the post-merge cast. Maybe add John to pre-merge.
I'd agree with
strategically. Oh, I was going to say, Gary's been saying all season that he thinks this is our Gabon. And the more and more it goes on, the more and more that I really do see just like a complete clusterfuck here in the home stretch where it's just going to be idiots tripping over each other to lose the game. So
totally. Shout out to Gary for that comparison because it has definitely been good versus evil with the Protos being good. And I say evil. Really, it's just people we're rooting against. Nobody's evil. It's an online game, but
yeah, heroes are villains.
Certainly evil things have been done in the game, which we love too. But yeah, it's totally been a season where this group of underdogs and misfits have banded together to oust this group of overly arrogant douchebags, frankly. Sorry, guys. And
I apologize. It's true.
I mean, we love all of you. Just as a disclaimer, you've provided us with endless entertainment, and we will definitely love to talk to you after this and have you back, but I mean, you were douchebags.
Disclaimer to that. I do not love Aaron or Dean.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He doesn't speak for me. There are people I don't like. Thanks.
Well, I think from my perspective, my job is to just get people with big personalities who will play the game 100% and come together to coexist. And so from my perspective, I think that those guys delivered on that. And I appreciate that. So that's all I can say on that. Now, whether I agree with them or not, that's another issue. That being said,
you can't have heroes unless you have good villains.
Yeah, I think that those guys are going to, after the game, hopefully they'll understand what they did wrong and not be cool with it. Maybe they will be. I don't know. We'll have to talk to them.
Hey, I just want to say something to Tommy. I know you heard me say a couple podcasts ago that I hate you. I just want you to know that I've turned around on you and I love you now, and I hope you win.
So speaking of Tommy, do we think he stands a chance to win?
I do.
I think it depends on who.
Yeah, I guess that depends if he's sitting next to like Aaron and Jack.
Kara.
Yeah, there's a lot of goats left. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, there's a lot of people with 0 odds.
Yeah, I think he'll lose to John, possibly Allison, and Angelina.
Mm-hmm. Allison's gained a lot of steam, and I think Allison is a good winner pick from this point. Like, I would have never picked her in the beginning, but I think right now her story is solid enough, and she's in a good enough position where she could totally win if she's in the final 3.
One thing that I think is that Allison is being perceived. Kara is like that classic Orger, like thinks they're the puppet master behind the scenes strategist that everybody else thinks is a goat. And I just think it's been really interesting to watch that dynamic develop throughout this first week.
I want to hear from Nofo on that. But I'll say real quick that people are viewing Allison as a Parvati-esque player, which she is not. But perception is reality, as we know.
I think Allison is probably my favorite, and I think her story is very compelling, and I think if she makes it to the end, she's going to have a very strong case of, being a very social player and making it to the end despite her ups and downs. Like, she is going to make it there by sheer force of her own game. I don't think she's going to be dragged there as a goat by anyone, by any means. If I was to choose an ideal winner, it would be her, Tommy or Angelina just because that would be so much fun.
Oh, I mean, how much would an Allison win here? I mean, that would just be awesome. I mean, the journey of Dean and all the bullshit that Peroto's been through, it would be a great ending. That being said, a lot can happen in 3 rounds, and there's no telling what will happen. Who knows what we'll be rooting for?
And I think Courtney made a very good point in the chat just now. You can make a case Allison's story is the story of the season, and I think that nails it right on the head. Is that how you say that? It hits the nail on the head. That's what I mean.
So we talked about Allison winning. Angelina's certainly stepped up. What do we think about Aaron's chances at this? I think he's a terrible player, but do we think if he ends up in the final 3, he stands a decent shot?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, but that's just because his entire alliance is on the jury, and they're going to be like, oh, Aaron survived against all the odds. He's so great. Like, if Aaron makes the end, it's not going to be anything of his own volition. It's going to be that, Nick or Tommy or, Kara or Allison is going to decide to make a move against John and then against Jack. And, like, they're just going to, like, who does Aaron have right now other than Jack, who's worthless? Like, he's just going to fade into the background. And the only way he's going to be sitting in the final 3 is if people just forget about him until then.
And honestly, I think that is a potential issue because who is Tommy? I don't think anyone cares about him in the game.
Yeah. I mean, look, personality and bonds
I meant
matter.
Aaron. I said Tommy. I meant Aaron.
Oh, well, either way, bonds matter. And if you're not likable, people don't know you, it's going to be hard to convince them to vote for you. I agree with what everyone else has said. I think any of the boys will have a hard sell, but if they're alone and they have 3 other guys on the jury, I don't know. Certainly they have a good shot.
Yeah. A Jack winning would be Hayden winning allies again, except Hayden didn't win allies.
Jack.
There's no way Jack wins.
Look, I love Jack as a person. I will very much look forward to him being on the server. I think he's a great guy. He's so boring. It has to be said. Jack, what the fuck? Wake up. Play the game.
Jack is irrelevant. He's not going to win. It doesn't matter who.
I will say I appreciate that Jack knows he's irrelevant. Like, you sometimes have those goats that go...
Thank you for knowing you're irrelevant and adding nothing.
Like, how they're like...
That doesn't make it better. All right, go ahead.
Everyone's talking. Let me finish. Jesus. Jack is irrelevant. Like, the thing is that in every season, you see the people who have no idea they're a goat. They think they're incredible at the game. They think they're this strategic mastermind that's going to be able to sit in the final 3 and win. Whereas Jack is completely aware of where he is. It reminds me so much of Eve, which is, fitting because he's Eve's friend. But like during victory, starting at like final 8, Eve knew that like everyone was just dragging him along to the end, but he was going to, make an attempt to get there.
No, I have to cut you off because no. If you know that, fucking say something, do something at Tribal Council. Anything. We were talking about this. What would a Jack have to do to win? Well, he would have to make a big ass move at Tribal Council, call out someone's idol, flip a vote live in front of everyone. None of this behind the scenes shit if you're that invisible. You have to know, hey, I'm going home anyway. I'm losing. Regardless, let me fucking do something in the interim. I don't give him the benefit of the doubt. Just because he knows that he's a goat doesn't mean he gets a pass to do nothing and we should feel sorry for him.
I don't feel sorry for him.
No, but I'm saying it's final 8. Like, there are times, I'm drunk, so I'm sorry if I'm aggressive, but there are times when you have plenty of time to make a move, plenty of time to turn the tide of the game against people. There are people who, at final 5, have turned people in their favor just by being an underdog. I don't buy the excuse. Get the fuck out. Quit the game if you're going to be a goat at the final 8.
Well, right. And I don't think he's going to be a GOAT at the final 3 if he makes it there. What I'm saying is when we played in Turks, Zeke got answered as the biggest GOAT in the game at, God, we did ours at final 9 and then didn't change his game plan for the rest of the game. Thought that sticking with his alliance, he was going to be able to pull it off at the end. I don't think Jack is that way because Jack knowingly answered himself for that question, knows his position. And I know that he's played games before, so I don't think he's content just being dragged along. If he proves me wrong and is just content, I'll eat my words here. I'm just saying I at least appreciate that he knows his position. Like, if he doesn't do anything with it, then fuck him. But, there's something to be said for understanding where you are.
He's going to shock the shit out of me if he lives up to what you're saying. I don't see it. He hasn't proven that to me at all. The only thing he's done of any interest is flip back to his original bros and take their advice, which I don't agree with.
Yeah.
I just think, He's going to be an unremarkable player that doesn't do dick and goes to the final three and doesn't win. The only time someone has had the awareness to know that they were GOAT and try to change it, I think was Morgan in Socotra, and it was unusual, but after I prodded at her all season, she finally flipped something at Tribal Council and went the fuck off, and it was like, hey, you might have a shot at winning, and of course she went home. That's kind of how I feel about Jack. Like, do something, because right now you're losing, so you might as well do something.
I agree with you there.
So that's Jack. We love you, Jack. No.
I do. You're a very nice person. You need to do something if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I love Jack. It's just frustrating from a host perspective because we get this every season of someone being a GOAT. And as someone who has played a lot of games, he should know better. So I'm going to fault you there, Jack.
I just think they're relevant.
Yeah. Let's move on to someone who could possibly win, but has fallen out of it and fallen into Jack territory, Kara, who a lot of the jury does not like and missed Thursday. That's a big no-no. Do we think Kara can't turn it around in time?
A lot. And she's gonna need to be sitting next to the exact right people to win.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I would say no, but she's still iconic. I still love her.
Corny says bad social game. I think I agree. I didn't agree with that initially, but I think in this merge, she's had a bad social game. I think aside from John, the Protos in general have had a pretty bad social game. Kara in particular has kind of just been going with the flow, even to the point of not showing up and not pre-voting. I just think that's hard to come back from.
Has Kara shown up today at all?
Yeah, she was talking to people this morning.
Okay, yeah,
and
but
she did apologize to me for having to work late.
Yeah, I guess just the struggle of being in Kara's position strategically is that there's the idea that, I'm just going to bring all these people in, follow the leader, cut them out of the end, and be the clear second in command who wins at the end. The issue with that is that it's just, you need to be hyper-social to pull it off. Everyone needs to like you, even if they don't realize you're that one actually pulling the strings.
Yeah. Here's the difference between the Jack and the Kara, is that Kara is involved in the strategy. And I think she's aware enough and has said she would make a move on someone like John. If she can make a public enough move on someone like John or Allison or Angelina, I think she could sway a jury. It's just going to depend on whether she has the balls to do that and how obvious it is to a jury.
She needs to have those moves, and then she needs to be sitting next to like Jack and then either like Aaron or Tommy. And I think that if you have either one of those two there, they have much more compelling games. And now you're fighting for your few moves to live up to Tommy or Aaron's relationship with the entire jury, as well as their merge game. And so I find it very, very difficult to find a combination of three people where she can pull off a win.
Yeah, I agree with Danny. I said it in the server, but like, she was a really great backseat driver all the way up until the merge. Like, she really does have good strategy. She has pretty decent read. It's just none of it is visual to anybody except like John. So Allison is getting off the project. Yeah. But I don't think she's going to come out of this. I honestly don't. But I do want to make a point. I know we're talking about Kara, but this was another thing that annoyed me about Dean. Kara didn't show up all day, and he could have taken that and at least tied the vote. But he didn't do any. Anyway, sorry. I derailed.
No, you're right. I mean, that tribal council was 4-1 to 1 to 1 to 1. I mean, she totally could have tied the votes.
It would have been 4-3.
Yeah.
4-3.
I mean, if he had been working all day and like even had that picture and showed it to somebody prior, like, look, I'm not going to go home. I bet you he could have flipped somebody.
Only needs one flip in that case.
Yep.
And with Kara not there, who's going to defend her?
Exactly.
Let's move on to Nick, because Nick is someone who...
Maybe Kara will be the first person to win with a Scooby-Doo reveal at Final Tribal Council.
There have been wins with Scooby-Doo reveals. Val famously had one.
Okay, well, maybe she'll be the 15th.
I mean, look, Scooby-Doo is not... we shit on it, and that's the majority of the time, but you could totally win by talking your way into a win at the Final Tribal Council. It's just very difficult, and you have to have relationships to back it up, which Kara does not. So yes, she would be like the first person to have 0 jury presence and flip a vote. But let's talk about Nick. Nick is someone who flipped the game. He's been a little too under the radar for my liking, but now he's got some moves under his belt, and I think he could flip-flop his way through to a final 3. To me, he's like an obvious winner. So obvious that I think around final 5 or 4, he'll get cut. What do we think?
I agree with that. He's in the position that I think I was in at Allies at the final 8, where you just look like you're such in a good spot. that everyone realizes and just goes after you.
Do we think if Nick makes the final three that the bros will be so butthurt by losing because of him that they would not vote for him to win?
I could see some of them voting against him, but I do think at the end of the day, they would vote for him.
I think because it's been a week, it's fine.
Yeah, I also think, again, it depends on who he's sitting next to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And someone was saying that Allison gets all this credit as this huge strategic, under-the-radar manipulator of men and all this shit that Aaron and Dean have fantasized about. Do we think that if Allison makes it to the end, that's going to be a huge bonus to her game?
Yeah, I think it. Whereas, you have Nick, who is being currently labeled as a snake, most likely to stab you in the back. Like, I don't think people are particularly happy with him. And like the way that they describe his strategy is negative, whereas Allison is being built up as this like mastermind, whereas Dean is slimy, I think those are very different ways to be described as a strategist.
So, playing devil's advocate, if you're one of the men and you're in an alliance with Nick and he flips on you, you end up on the jury. Your argument against him at a final tribal council is probably going to be, that was so stupid. You gave them the opportunity to take the advantage while we were ahead. You really blew it. And honestly, I don't know if I disagree with that. I mean, it's boring, and I commend him playing hard and changing the game to get to the end. But that alliance of men was looking pretty good, and especially for someone like Nick, where you can just subtly build relationships outside of it, it might not have been the worst move for him to stick to that.
It probably wouldn't be, but I also think that, we talk a lot about like wanting to be a few steps ahead of people. And I think Nick smartly was like, hey, we're going to go to 8 with this group that's all been voting together. And at what point am I going to have people that I can flip to? Because he had a good relationship with Angelina, and the 3 people coming over for Peroto were people that he was friends with before the swap. Like, those were the people that he was going to be able to pull in as his numbers. Like, you got to take the move when you have the options to move forward. You don't want to wait until they knock out Angelina, Allison, Cara, John, and then the only people left to kind of maneuver with are Tommy and maybe Dan, who you don't have great relationships with, and then you're just on the bottom of a 6-person alliance. Like, I think it's the best move for him strategically. I think the problem is, I don't know if he has the relationships with the people that he betrayed to make them want to reward him for being smart.
Yeah, and I think the point should be made too that alliance was becoming very Miumbo heavy, especially when you add in like Tommy. At some point, Lauren was with them too. So, if you're someone like Nick, who's originally Nairi, you might be thinking, well, fuck, if we get down to final 6 and I'm one of 2 Nairi left in the game, I'm getting picked off,
Yeah, and I think we're definitely underestimating the Brochachos' egos. I think that come time, if Nick is in final, I think their egos might be severely bruised to the point that they wouldn't vote for him anyway. But yeah, I don't know. That's just me. Although Carl seems pretty chill, so
I don't know. I mean, look, as much as we say, as long as you have things to back up what you're saying, proof of your game, you can flip a vote, especially a bitter juror. It is a lot better to ask for forgiveness and permission in Stranded. And it has been done, specifically with Sebastian. That jury was very bitter against him, but at the end of the day, over the weekend, they thought about it and they decided, well, he's the best player. It can be done. Just have to have the moves to back it up. And I think Nick is someone who does. So we'll see. This is going to be an interesting finish.
Yeah, and if Nick's at the end, he has the argument, I'm at the end. That's why I did it.
Yeah, I think outside of Angelina and John, I think the field is wide open for people to make big moves and make a case to win. I think if either Angelina or John is in the final 3, there's not as much of a case. But for the rest of these guys, I think there's a lot of game left to be played. And so I think that's going to make the finals very exciting because it's very unpredictable as to who can win at this point.
It's just so funny to me how quickly Angelina went from being kind of a non-entity in the game to now everyone considering her a winner threat. And like
that's how you do it.
The potential all-star. Like it's just like that came out of nowhere this week. It was wild.
And that's why I say you can do it. If you're a Jack or a Tommy or a Cara or any of these people under the radar, you can totally make that surge at the end. You just have to pull the trigger. Don't just wait around.
To be fair, if I said preseason at the final 8, we all consensus agree that Angelina's a threat to win, you'd all think I'm shitting you.
Could you imagine how strong she would be and how unstoppable she would be if she had any idea of Survivor strategy at all?
Yeah. Yeah. She's making rookie mistakes that people who've seen the show would not make. Like, maybe don't tell people about your idol. little things that she should know better. But she's making those mistakes. But you know what? You have to commend it because it's authentic and it's working. So as of right now, it's okay. If she gets booted next, we'll pick and choose of what she did wrong. But,
and it's probably true to the game. It's probably true to the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also want to say her being high the last few nights has been the most entertaining thing for me. Like her answering her confessional, like, bro, I'm too high for this shit right now. I'll come back to this. Like, I died.
Yeah. This season is nothing short of characters, if not maybe the worst gameplay we've ever seen. But, okay, so we're heading into our final week. I think overall, like some other people were saying, top to bottom, it's definitely one of our best seasons, certainly one of the most entertaining. Never disappointed, both in serious... It's almost like, some seasons we get boring gameplay, but really great interpersonal stories like Indonesia, Turks and Caicos, Morocco. Some seasons are completely dramatic, but we're missing out on like that heart of the season, or only half of the season is super dramatic. This season, top to bottom, every player has been a character. They've delivered something. It's been completely enthralling to watch. So I want to commend everyone for that and being themselves and bringing something to this game, except for Jack. No shade.
No, I said they're all idiots.
Oh, well, I heard what I wanted to hear.
Inclusive of Jack.
Yeah. No, I like Jack too. I think everybody's brought something great to this season, so I commend those guys for that. Can't wait to see how this final week ends up playing out being, but I think it will be entertaining regardless. So no matter what happens, we're here for it. And we'll talk to you next time. So thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I'm sorry for just coming in randomly without introducing myself.
Yeah.
It was funny. So,
Yeah,
fun.
For all of that.